Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is James True. First, I have a couple of announcements. We're still fundraising for the studio move and for production of our next film. If you would like to help, we have links right in the description. Anything is greatly appreciated. Any donation of $100 or more, you're going to get a guest spot on Forbidden Knowledge News. You get a copy of both films, a warning from history, and your name in the credits of the upcoming film. Also, watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, right now on Tubi. You can also get a Rokfin premium membership. This helps support us. Go to rokfin.com/FKN+. You'll get access to all our premium content and all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin. Finally, you can download our episodes directly through our podcast provider, Spreaker, and that is always free to you. We're booking guests for June. If you have suggestions or if you'd like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today, I want to welcome back to the show James True. He is an author and philosopher. His work is rooted in philosophy, mythology, and consciousness. James, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself, my friend?
I'm excellent, man. Can't wait to get into this. Today we're going to be talking about your new book, The Black Eye Club. The title alone is a conspiracy theorist's wet dream. But when delving into the information, all is not as it seems. More and more, I'm starting to agree with you. We live in a society of comfort and ignorance, and until 2020, most people were perfectly fine with it. And then we enter a new era of insane conspiracy culture after the COVID operation. And all of a sudden, we're in an Archon-controlled prison planet where reptile globalists are harvesting our loosh. And on top of that, we're entering Armageddon. That is definitely true if that's what you perceive it to be. But what if everything is and has always been in our control, and we allow our own imprisonment? We participated with the global reality theater. We voted. We bought their products and ate their poisonous foods, and we perpetuated the reality that we find ourselves in now. Maybe we're just being given a cosmic nudge to pull up our big boy and big girl and maybe them they pants and grow up a bit. So lots to get into here. First, remind the audience about yourself and your work.
Well, I got to tell you, that's a lifeline just hearing you even saying these things, because it's tricky business to make it through the gauntlet. But yeah, my name's James True. I just completed my 7th book called Black Eye Club. I'm obviously an author, and I call myself a sophist, but if I was trying to be fancy, I'd say a philosopher. A sophist is one who's peddling wisdom on the street, and so I'd like that term better because it's more akin to really the decentralization of gnosis and where we're going and what's needed, and it's not going to happen inside of an academic shell. You're going to need to really grind your nose into the pavement and watch the skin burn off, and then miss the skin, and then think about ways to not let that happen again. And the entire process, to me, has really, only because I've been through it, and it's been significantly painful to my psyche, that I started to realize maybe this is actually progress. Maybe this is actually what growth feels like. And so I see us as going through a gauntlet and then a gauntlet, and then a gauntlet, and then a gauntlet, and that this circular motion is necessary for us to constantly be challenging ourselves to expand and realize the medium of belief, really, that is underneath everything that we have. And once I let go of insisting that everything had to be true and everyone had to be on a quest for what is the most accurate representation, once I really let go of that fantasy and realize that that's not what people are doing, that as you eloquently said in the beginning, that this is I say it's a comfort movement, not a truth movement, and that I think this is a valid thing. I don't think this is even a slight against humanity. I think comfort means you're burning less calories, you're burning less electricity to maintain a certain equilibrium, and that equilibrium is going to generate a certain amount of morality and compassion from you. So the more equilibrium you have, the more compassionate you're going to be to your fellow man. So I'm not in the business of let's rip open these people's eyeballs and shove the truth in with a giant fire hose. I'm guilty of that. I've written some of my early works have been Blueprints of Mind Control is very much that. It's in your face, the most direct energy weapon of clear water that's trying to show you wake the fuck up is there. But I've moved past that. I don't reject those things. I just think this is necessary for the gauntlet that's led me on a hermetic journey. I think even after your intro, I think you too. Well, once we realize this is an alchemical process, everything changes, and we can really get our fingers in the dirt, because what we're dealing with, it's compost. What we're dealing with is something much more organic than we first thought.
And there's a lot of encouraging things that are occurring right now, including more people that are aligning with the things that we're going to be discussing today and these viewpoints. So I'm very encouraged about the future. I think that the awakening is multi-layered, and once we peel through another layer, there's about infinite more that we can go through, and each layer contains a level of growth for our consciousness. Now, I think a great place to start, let's get a synopsis of your new book, Black Eye Club.
Okay, great. So a few years ago, I started to actually the whole thing actually started with, why are all these famous people, why do they have black eyes? This is how it started a long time ago. This is like three years ago. And the standard stories that I was hearing on the street didn't make sense to me, that someone like the Queen of England's going to go underground and take a punch to the face and not flinch. And it's not because I don't think that she could handle that, or she's not a cold-blooded killer, or whatever you want to say. It's more about just the way the anatomy works, the way our body works, that there's certain reflexes that honestly, there's no neocortexual thought involved. There's no conscious thought that goes into certain reactions that we have. And it led me down the road of just doing what I do, which is just learning how these parts are different, which parts work the way they do. And it led me to this idea of the Eye of Ra, which is kind of like a big tangent. I left the Black Eye Club entirely, and I really just went out on this notion of there's an aperture of consciousness that seems to exist inside of all of us, a drum or an opening, so to speak, much like a camera lens has an aperture, and that the wider that aperture is, the more light is able to burn into the film, and the film's able to develop a deeper, richer picture with less light. So there's more information with less light coming through, and this burns the film out. This is pre-digital, of course, but it burns your film quickly. There's a lot of disadvantages to having a wide open aperture, but you're also able to see things at night, for example, or capture things during the day, or quick, fast things. There's all kinds of advantages and disadvantages to this. And if consciousness worked the same way, then I would be able to trace and find certain anatomy and certain processes that would show us this, and we do. We do not freeze up when we freak out like a deer in the headlights. We have this throttle, this ability to either hallucinate a reality or stop the hallucination of a reality on top of what we see in order to survive. So we don't face certain truths, such as uh, the Vietnam War. That you could be invested in that war as someone who loves America, and or as someone who's enlisted in the Marines, and now you're there and you cannot cope with the fact that what you're doing there is not being a good guy, that maybe you're doing some bad stuff, and that your aperture would be there to protect you, and so it would actually hide certain truths from your psyche. This is called tunnel vision. People have this when they get angry, when they get afraid, even when you enter into shock. Your body literally says, hey, your arms and legs, fuck that. I'm just going to protect your core because I'm in shock right now. So all of this just revealed itself to me. And one of the clearest ways is the idea that there is dopamine and melanin inside the body, and that melanin is not a pigment of your skin. It's actually an absorbing electrical chemical that absorbs information, i.e., sensory input that would otherwise freak us out when we're staring directly into the face of a predator. I use predator really broadly here: spiritual entity, a large creature that is bigger than we ourselves could perceive, that we could be in the room with this creature but not freak out because our aperture tightens and closes and just doesn't show us that data. So this body has this gas pedal and this brake, this melanin and this dopamine, and that I just unwrapped the science into why this works, how it works this way, and why our eyes are really like a Plato's cave, a place where shadows are painted on the wall by our amygdala. And the amygdala decides, this is what I want you to see, because, quite frankly, if I showed you the entire truth of what the occipital lobe just told me is there, you are not going to make it. You're gonna pee in your pants, you're going to freeze up, and you're going to die. And so this is a natural process that's built into us. We're not able to just handle pure raw truth. We need a volume to turn it down. I'm going to stop here, but this gets us back to Black Eye Club. I swear it does. But it's just, this was just such a huge sidebar for me that it really led me into just researching this, the way consciousness itself works, the pineal gland, meaning I call it the first eye, not the third eye, because ultimately it would seem as if your reptile sees the reality first, because your neocortex requires at least a half a second for it to catch up. So to really understand what's going on, we would have a first eye, which is impulsing data, information first, long before our brain gets it. So to understand consciousness, you're really looking at this triune, this trinity of reptile, spirit animal, and man.
Right on. Now, this is what I really want to focus on, is these doorways of perception. And in fact, this is going to be the topic of my next film. It's going to be about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, what we understand as contact, the reality beyond our perception, and how these things can affect our material reality and how everything connects together. And what you're just describing, it fits perfectly with all the research that I've been getting into. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about the Black Eye Club itself and these individuals. Is this
Great.
supposed to be some sort of initiation ritual that they were doing?
Okay, so to skip ahead, but one important point is that our olfactory gland, the mouth, it's in the top of your mouth, and we shut that off when we're born. It's alive when we're a fetus, but once we're born, we shut that off. And that olfactory gland is really the ultimate truth detector. It's able, because it exists, it bypasses your neocortex. All of your thought processes are bypassed olfactory. So there's really no way to hack a smell. A smell's going to come in and just show you everything. And how this relates to the Black Eye Club is because if you could find a way to remove the brake pedal from your Plato's cave, from your eye, then the truth of what you smell could be rendered in full reality and that would be painted inside your eye, and you would see a world that has no filter on it. And what that filter would look like is, because you're able to perceive all smell, just like a dog is a truth teller, just like a horse is one of the best truth tellers. The horse's olfactory is about 20 times the resolution of humans, and they're able to smell the deceit that is coming in and out of your pores. It's not, I'm not saying there's a scent called deceit, but they're able to detect the auric field of you through your smell, and they're rendering it in their eyes. Their Plato's cave is rendering this vision. So a dog, just a really quick to give you a picture of this, a dog would see the world in black and white, but the smells would be broadcast in greens, because the greens would give it another dimensional context to associate where in the field is the rabbit, things like that. So the Black Eye Club, the person who wants the serum, it's a serum, it's not a punch in the face. And the serum takes place because you're injecting something into your retinal wall, the walls of your eyeballs itself have all your rods and cones installed, but more importantly, they have a layer, a epithelial layer of melanocytes, and these melanocytes distribute melanin. If you can find a way to remove the melanocytes' ability to secrete melanin, you have now removed the ability for your eyes to filter reality. What I'm saying is not made up. I've just described to you ocular albinism. I've just told you why shamans in Africa are typically albinos. I've told you why Noah is an albino. I've told you why anyone who has albinism suffers from strabismus or jittery eyes or cross-eyed, and that this is tied into schizophrenia and Parkinson's too, because all these people are suffering from a deficit or a limitation or a spike in this brake pedal that allows them to slow reality down. So technically, if you want to picture what someone with albinism, with ocular albinism, or there's many different kinds of this, but someone who you would typically picture as that Tom Hanks movie, The Monk, that's an albino, that dude who's lit and weird and everyone doesn't understand him and he's beating himself at night. He's actually doing that because he is strapped to the front of a train with his eyes open, and he is screaming through reality, and there's not a fucking thing he can do to stop it. And it is terrifying for him. And the villagers call him shaman because of it. He is Zaru Zaru, the one who has the inability to hide, would be the Swahili word for this. And so the members of the Black Eye Club are injecting a serum that's eliminating this ability, which gives them what I would call the ability to see demons. I'm not saying this dramatically. I just want you to think about what smells really are. A smell is a possession that surrounds your field, and that possession has a certain algorithm or a certain characteristic to it, such as I'm drunk. This is the perfect example. You can smell the sweat of alcohol through someone's pores when they're drunk, and they're there, but they're not there. They're possessed by this scent. And so the Black Eye Club, the one who has the serum, is able to see not just drunk people, because all of us can do that. That's an easy one. But they're able to see the true, authentic aura of someone because they're not turning off their smell. So Atlantis, Lemuria, all these ideas of us being able to see the aura, even Joseph's coat of many colors, is showing you this concept of the auric field just being the smell possessions that haunt you. And that as these smell, the idea of baptism is a real life exorcism, because you're washing away the source of the demon. The smell on your body, right, would be a source of this. So all of the magic that we do, even the fact that we're living in a culture where we're spreading aluminum paste on our underarms to cover our demon smell, is proof of how we use this in deception, how we use this as a survival mechanism, etc.
So right now, what we're seeing with celebrities, some royals, some of the globalists that are being thrown under the bus, scapegoated. Some are even being sacrificed. It seems like this is all being put forward as some sort of ritual, but these people are also in the Black Eye Club.
I think that most of the witches that you see burned in Hollywood, keep in mind that Hollywood is a wood that's meant to be burned. So the entire sacrificial process is not an
Right.
accident. It's like, hey, this is what we do here, and people watch us because we know how to burn. I think those figures really are just char that burns well. They don't need to know or see anything deeply. They are riding the coattails of just witness. Keep in mind that fame is the most intoxicating drug that there is, and so fame ends up being quite a mainstay for an addict. And typically, an addict's not going to be someone who's necessarily in charge. Typically, an addict's going to be someone who doesn't necessarily even want to know the truth. They just want their fix. So personally, what I think is a lot of the archetypes that we see in Hollywood, these aren't lit people. These are people that we set on fire. I know that we think that lit people, and setting them on fire those looks sound really the same, but they're really not. The lit people, I think, would actually, they don't need the drug of fame because fame is such a difficult drug to be the mistress, to have that as a mistress. You can't go outside, people show up at your house. So you learn pretty quick that it's actually more valuable to not be famous. And so to me, the people that would take the black eye serum are more about the ones in the background that do pull the strings, but that they're looking for the advantage that they have. See, most of the economy is going to work through a blackmail economy. The real world, the thing that countries work in, what we call countries, is just simply a blackmail economy of various pirates that have just, achieved the most successful way of maintaining a culture, a people. I'm not even calling this bad. I mean, I get, we can say, oh, they're the evil. I'm fine. Okay. But I mean, to me, they're just clever, and they're not really out to necessarily torture us simply because they have a pretty full life.
Right.
I think they have a lot better fun. It'd be like me getting off, like tricking my chickens, like, oh, I'm going to move my chicken feed over here. I am in charge. Like, it's just, no, I'm going to be like doing a lot of weird stuff. I don't necessarily, I'm not looking out for the chicken's psychological well-being, but I want them to be chickens. I want them to be the best chicken they can be. So it's like, as a farmer, this is the better way to, I think, to look at who's on the black eye serum is someone who more farms, not really people, I think, because that's not really the product. It's really more the witness and the attention. Because the more people that throw their throttle behind a certain belief, the more torque that belief has. And these are people that really work with the torque belief. It's not really about reality. It's more about what do people think? What is their tendency to think? Because that has so much more power in this world over, say, a factual piece of information that you happen to have that no one else has. That's not very powerful. But if you can control someone's belief, so you're gonna pick the addicts. Those addicts are gonna be working for you. They're gonna be your boy bands or your Britney
Yeah.
Spears or whatever else that looks like, right? So those are two different genres. So the serum people aren't really the famous people, but they're definitely the people that are lit and in charge, so to speak.
It is definitely all a free will game, and I have unplugged completely from television, politics, most
Yeah.
toxic things, especially after 2020. I started to really become aware of things in about 2012. The awareness grew. I started doing this show, and the more that I became aware of things, the more I started to check out from the system, and the better my life got, and the better my outlook and perception on everything else got. And then it has this effect on other people in my lives, which is a fantastic, amazing thing. But it seems like what's happening now, if you step outside really far back and look at the bigger picture, it's like they're forcing us to unplug ourselves and take control of our own lives in a certain way. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, it'd have to be. This is how you raise cattle. You're going to be weaning them for a while until they can go out into the world and feed themselves. The farmer doesn't need obedience. He needs self-sufficiency. He wants those chickens to wake themselves up. He wants like if he can fit a chicken that like wakes itself up and knocks on the door and delivers its own eggs to him. That's what the farmer wants. So the farmer's not he's not afraid of the chickens. He doesn't care if the chickens have guns. He really doesn't care. He's like, man, chickens, you guys want guns? That's fine. It's like, this is not going to hurt me. If you guys want this, if you guys don't want this, I don't even care what color you paint the hen house. You want to tear it down, it doesn't matter. My goal is to raise the better chicken that requires less effort from me. This is just how I would think they would do it because a billionaire or a beyonder, let's call him a beyonder for this conversation. One of these people, elite doesn't work, okay? Because you and I are elite. Your perspective is elite. So we can't call these people elite, all right? So let's call them beyonders just so we can really understand what these people are. These people have left the news just like you and I did. But these people have done one more thing. They don't actually look at the news as unnecessary or lies or bullshit or whatever. It's an exact necessary feed that has to come down the trough because there are people that need that to keep their reality together. And these people, if you understand that we are living not in a prison planet, we are living in anarchy. And I mean this in a beautiful way. I mean this like the forest is anarchistic. It is. And it has gangs of trees that take over and they say, we're a grove now. And they have flatlands that take over and say, we're a valley. And the river rips it through it and says, fuck you all, we're a river now. And this is the anarchy of nature and that we're living in the same thing. Even though it looks like we have politics, we know that it's not real. We know it's professional wrestling, but it's not actually fair to dismiss it because it's serving a very valuable purpose. It's keeping the fabric of reality together. And this ultimately is absolutely necessary because so many of us, because all of us, I believe, are symbiotic, even the beyonder. Because we're symbiotic, we're going to need to be in the same collective pool, but each of us need to be able to call each other a liar or a crazy person. And that if I can call you crazy or if I can call you a liar, you and I can share the same reality because, hey, you're just lying or you're just crazy. And so when you look at what conspiracy theory is, that word, it's simply the glue of fabric itself that's holding us all together. And it's allowing us all to be in the same pudding, but we don't actually have to admit that each other's pudding is valid. And so I think the Beyonder understands this. He wants to see the smells of everyone because he's no longer afraid because he simply doesn't lose any calories anymore trying to cling to the sides of a pool that aren't even there. This is an entire matrix of belief. It's not a matrix of fact. I know it feels that way. I know that we had to pretend that it was a matrix of fact in order for us to just survive this long. We're 200,000-year-old creatures, but ultimately our reality is getting closer to understanding it's more about witness. This is what the internet's showing us, is giving you a tangible idea that consciousness itself is its own terrain, it's its own texture. And because we're coming into this new era, we're going to lose a lot of people and they're going to scream that it's torture and that people are trying to kill us simply because they're not able to jump on to this etheric, intangible idea of belief, of the internet, of even cryptocurrency. All three of these things are the same thing. It's this idea of intangibility being real. And I think mostly that's what people are having trouble kind of coming to grips with right now.
Also, it seems that we're seeing this kind of biblical playbook, this forced prophecy in certain ways that connect with especially those that are religious or Catholic, that will really guide their consciousness in those directions. And it seems like this is a big part of the agenda at whole that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and if I could expand our thinking on this a little bit, to expand that, I know this sounds like a weird example, but it's just the last one I used and it makes sense. So this is just one of many. When you go to the grocery store, you walk in and you pick up your groceries and you go to check it out. And when you check it out, at least where I go and everywhere I've gone, it's very difficult to not get a receipt. It's very difficult to not be handed a sheet of paper that has this substance on the paper that's kind of chalky and it's blue. And as I'm thinking through it, I know that every single grocery store in the world has this, and that everyone's being forced to take this receipt. And if I am at a point in my consciousness, I need you guys to buckle up here. If I'm at a point in my consciousness where I am not getting enough oxygen from the environment, if I'm not feeling enough of a fulfillment that I'm seeing all of reality, if the nectar of life is not sufficient for me, I'm going to pull more nectar out. If my diaphragm has grown larger and I'm ready for a thicker reality, and I'm living in a world of mundanity that's surrounded by zombies that are asleep, in order for me to stay sane, I'm going to have to pull that nectar out of the oxygen in the room. And I'm going to look for whatever props that I can find to construct a reality that's biteable, that's digestible to me, because I have a bigger requirement for nutrients now than the average person. So I'm bringing this up because I'm using the receipt as an example to stay alive. I'm living in a world that's pretending that all this is real. And the only thing I can do to survive is take this receipt and stretch my mind and find a way to find more dilation. And so I've created the idea that this receipt is here and I'm supposed to touch it, because if I touch it, the ink gets into my fingers. And if the ink gets in my fingers, the nanoparticles that are there are going to invade and convince my cellular ion channels to convey a signal that's going to tap into a Morgellons spaceship that's living in another dimension inside my mitochondria, and that this is a healthy response to living in a pool of people that are insisting that reality isn't there. That the people that are suppressing and squeezing their buttholes so tight are forcing people like you and me to have these jaunts into conspiracy world, and that they're forcing us to squeeze our fractal because we know the reality's there. We know it's there. We know the deeper tendons of this, the depth of this place is there, and we're being held back by people that are afraid to enter into the deep end. So we corrode together and we join arms and we stretch into the realm of conspiracy, and we find things like Zeta Reticuli and the weirdest shit we can find, because we're desperately trying to break the epidermis of this consciousness and slip into the next side. So the biblical stuff is an important breach. It's part of how we break the water. It's part of how we finish the birth, and that things will only have to get weirder from this point because our capacity for weird has grown and we would asphyxiate without it. So I think as time grows, we're just watching ourselves launch into the world, kind of like from 50s, from like, everything's tame in the 40s, and then all of a sudden the 50s hits and people are shaking their hips. Like at the time that was huge, man. Right. And right now you have to kind of picture the same kind of hugeness, and it's going to look like this. That receipt, it was just one example. I'm not saying that. And by the way, I'm not even saying that that's not real or real. I really think that there's probably something to some kind of idea of how come everyone is touching this receipt. Like there would be reasons why all these connections. If anyone is living in life, it's like a seagull who knows how to go for the fucking hot dog on the beach. It's all these are opportunities to have witness, to grab consciousness, right? So if we ignore these things, if we insist no one would ever do that, and there's no such thing as conspiracy, we're just simply hiding ourselves from the true reality of what this place really looks like. And we have no choice but to deflect and create other things to break through until we finally crush that ceiling and slip into, I think, really this new era, this Aquarian era, isn't an accident. That we've left this Piscean world and we've entered into this new intangibleness of things, and that it seems to be a hermetic teacher. To me, none of this is on accident. It seems to be slowly unrolling itself, and that this is how the fractal would have to look, basically.
Yes, it's happening collectively and individually. And an example is I've had plenty of guests who will start out having a singular paranormal experience or spiritual experience, or they are abducted by aliens, and it opens up their perception. And the next thing you know, they're having constant experiences, and they're delving more and more into these realms, and their experiences become more and more profound. It's because these layers of our perception are just being peeled away right now, because we're becoming accepting that more of these things are part of our unseen reality, right?
Oh, totally. This is why I think the amygdala and the eye of Ra is such crucial work. It's why I stopped doing the Black Eye Club just long enough, because I started to realize that, wait, this explains UFOs, this explains Bigfoot, this explains shamanistic experiences, this explains ghosts, this explains poltergeist. And that what's happening is the amygdala, once you understand how the eyes truly work, which is the eyes are hallucinatory engines. There's so much more about this in my book. I don't mean to plug it, but seriously, if you want, I don't want to, there's so much more about this. What one of many things is that there are no blue receptors in the fovea, the actual part that reads color. There's not an actual blue receptor waiting for you. It's on the outer perimeter, which means we hallucinate all the blue that we see in the world. We actually hallucinate. We actually have to imaginate it into our existence. And when you start to research how we plot color, there's a clear order. White came first, red came next. Then we had yellows and oranges and greens, and then finally blue came after that. So once you understand that colors themselves are hallucinated based on the input and what's the most accurate thing to call something, you could start to picture how we ourselves are painting the world based on our comfort level, and that we would paint something. We would paint a creature in a costume simply to explain why the energy is in the room. And Bigfoot is the perfect example of this, because Bigfoot would be our friendly, fuzzy, dog-like human. So it's part pet, but it's part human. And so the energy itself, in order for us to make contact with this, it's going to have to create a visage, a costume that allows us to approach it more. Otherwise, the amygdala will turn it invisible. And this is why when you look at what a modern alien is, let's think about this for a second. The alien has no teeth. I'm talking about the little grays, okay? Think about it. It has no teeth, so it can't bite you. It has no genitals, so it can't rape you. Yeah. It doesn't even appear to eat meat. It has very weak arms. It can't beat you up. It can't punch you. It's shorter than you, so it's not going to make fun of you because you're short. It has no hair of any kind, so it's completely sleek and clean. It is the most hygienic creature you've ever imagined. It wears no clothes, so it has nothing to hide. It has no weapons on it at all, and it has eyes that are as big as a fucking kitten. It has a larger head, which is a characteristic of a baby, which is we have a natural response to want to love a baby. And so if you're looking at trying to tap into energy, our psyche will paint this energy as a dragon or as a Bigfoot. And that the difference between the dragon and the Bigfoot is how our amygdala, how our body is willing and able to observe through the aperture, the drum of consciousness. What happens is that as more of us collectively hallucinate something, a creature like a fox or a turkey congeals into a framework, and we recognize it immediately. If you think back the first time that you ever saw a turkey, if you've ever pictured a wild turkey, you've been normalized. But if you can picture what that would have been like the first time you saw that, you'd be like, what the fuck is that? What is that weird? And if it was to haunch up, it would take you a while to understand what that thing is. But through practice, through cultural practice, we understand. And I would imagine that if we could pull ourselves back into the clinical opportunity of seeing that for the first time, all of us would actually interpret that turkey much differently. It's because we have the word turkey that we kind of put our congruence of the hallucination into a slot. But until we have that thing, each of us are going to be limbically reacting to how the creature felt. and it's going to be felt in a way that gives it a visual, like it had thorny spikes and it dripped blood, or or it had pokey feathers and it said gobble gobble. That's the same creature, but the aperture is giving you a different interpretation. So if we watch our zoology, if we watch our cryptozoology, we're really watching our mythology in raw form, and it's the most direct feedback we have, as long as we can stop ridiculing each other for hallucinating. Because really what we're doing is we're creatively reaching under the couch and trying to grab the remote control. We know it's there, we can't see it, but if we reach farther enough, if we stretch far enough, we can touch the edge of it and maybe pull it closer to us.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you perceive these intelligences, entities to be. Are they part of our psyche? Are they egregores, thought forms that we created, part of our own cosmic interverse, really cosmic energies that we connect to? And the more we interact with them, the more they can shift and meld into things that fit our evolutionary process, I guess, our consciousness evolution.
Yeah. So I think animism is the closest tools that we have to get ourselves here. And in order to understand these higher energies, I think it starts with understanding that you yourself are actually much bigger than you think you are. And that when you're in your car, you associate into the bumpers and you become all of that. When you're wearing roller skates, this really happens. If you're wearing skis, it really happens. If you're good at these things, if you play pool, you associate into the end of the cue stick. And this is more accurately who you are. Your home is your shell. You become the entire place itself. And once we can, I think, more tangibly understand the truth of this all, that the legal lease that you have on your place is a plasmatic epidermis. It's a bubble of energy that says, I own this encompassing area, and you associate. That's who you are. It's a reflection of who you are, how your yard looks, all these things. If we practice this more, and we are, this is why people mow their yards. It's the first inkling steps to where we're starting to understand how this animism works. We understand that we're larger than we are, and that's the first step we take to understanding that other things are larger than they are too. The Hardee's restaurant down the street is a living organization, and that the people who work there are rural mitochondria that come in and out of the cell and live inside and leave for a while. And if you want to understand the energies around you, the egregores around you, you really have to understand that you're inside a living creature that's so vast. It goes from so far from horizon to horizon. You've never been able to slip outside of it long enough to recognize that it's an object. And so, the mountain I live on is an object. The neighborhood you live on is an object. The city you live on is an object. These entities have feelings, they have plasma, and you're going to interpret this plasma or you're going to ignore this plasma. It's going to be totally based on how comfortable your aperture is, how comfortable your consciousness is. This is why some people see these things and some people don't. So to understand the power that's outside of you, it really becomes impossible, because so much of the power all the power that you really interact with is actually not outside of you. There's an epidermis outside of you, and that epidermis is outside of another epidermis that's outside of you. And the first epidermis that we learn is, maybe I can stop watching the news. I don't know if that's possible. And it's hard, because if you're going to go down the street, you're going to see a billboard. Or you're going to see, the worst is you're going to see your friend saying, yeah, I'm trying to stop watching the news and this is what happened. And so even if you find allies that are trying to stop it, it's still coming in. I think that that's a good place to be, but then there's an even healthier place to be, this is what I was talking about earlier, which is to look back and understand news is not poison. News is toxic back when you were believing it and you insisted that you had to drink it, like pee water. You're in a kiddie pool and you're drinking the pee water of everyone else. You can be in the kiddie pool and play. I know this sounds gross, and be okay with it. Because once you understand it's pee and once you understand you're peeing in it too, you reach a certain level where now you're ready. You're not drinking anymore. and you really want to get out of there. You want to learn how to swim as fast as you can. And the new water's cold. You get why people don't even want to go there. It's kind of freaky. Then all these longer people are swimming around. You could drown, and there's a deep end. What the fuck is that? So really, we're watching this happen right now, and we just get to we should be more patient with each other, especially the ones that are calling us conspiracy theorists. You're just watching the kiddie pool. You're watching people just insist, hey man, you're saying that there's a bigger pool out there and I don't buy it, and that this is all urine, and no, this is heated from our government, and the yellow meat that's clean, and everything else, this is the depth that will always be, and it's safe because no one will drown, and how would we ever want a world that's any different?
Yeah.
And it's, so it's good. I think all this is good. But I see Building 7 as a, if you and I got really good, if your movies just took off even more than they already have, if my book was to take off more than it really had, I think you and I would be so successful that we'd reach a point where we're like, hey, let's stimulate other people to wake up too. Let's not force it on them, but let's give really clear
Yeah.
hermetic signs, doorways that they could see. And I believe Building 7 is one of
Mm.
these. I really believe that that was put there for me. I don't just mean me, but for me, because someone cared about me. Someone said, dude, reality's bigger. Don't worry. You don't have to go with the blue receipt, James.
Yeah.
There's a reality where there are beyonders out there that are living in airships, and people are you can't even see the airship because the idea of a beyonder living like that above the clouds, we don't even render it. It's like Christopher Columbus when there's that story where he came to the islands and the natives are like, "How did you get here?" And he's like, "On that boat." And they're like, "I don't see a boat." The idea that something would be so large, they couldn't even fathom it. So they don't fathom it. That's where we are
Right.
now. And as we get closer to God, if you think about what omniscience is, we're just building the framework to understand God better. So what is the internet but just a place where you can be all things, know all things, have omnipresence, omniscience? All this is building us up into this symbiotic interface where we can see things that are larger than us, and start to really understand the energy around us.
Yes, man, 100%. And you've spent some time researching schizophrenia and the connections to these things that we're talking about with our perception. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So any kind of incident where people tend to lose reality, we tend to put them all in the same building and say these people are crazy. Just the other day, I was on a podcast and someone made a comment about this guy sounds schizophrenic, and I don't think we really understand what schizophrenic means. Schizophrenic seems to be a reaction to the potency of reality. And so the person that's suffering from schizophrenia, and not all of them even suffer, this is what's so weird about this disease, is that the person that is under this uh, doesn't want to extrapolate too much. If they look into the symbolism of reality, it burns too much, so they stop. And so the schizophrenic is really not someone that's really out there thinking a lot of crazy things. It's more of almost like a concrete literalist that can't unliteralify himself because he's too afraid. So it's almost like he's clinging too hard to the legitimacy of the pulp in the paper versus the words that are actually on the paper. Because if he thinks about himself extrapolating, he starts to lose himself. This is a crystal meth trip too, by the
Mm.
way. These are very similar kind of reactions that you have. And so the meth dealer, the someone under meth in a room with someone else in a meth, they'll actually share a hallucination sometimes, where they'll see a shadow that looks the same. Well, they'll build each other's simulation off each other. Keep in mind we're symbiotes, so my aperture can tap into your aperture simply by our faces looking at each other. It's an instant feedback. It happens through functional MRI. We can trace all this. So your aperture is able to build comfort, to hijack the comfort of someone else's reality and accept something more. So the first stages of hallucination tend to be shadow figures. I see a shadow somewhere. The second stage tends to be the shadow figure has eyes of some kind. So this is showing you that we build our hallucination based on how comfortable we are. And I know that crazy people, what we call crazy people, we tend to view as not being comfortable. But if you imagine it, just like we were talking earlier about the albino, the person without melanocytes, it's not that they're necessarily having a good time. It's that simply their level of comfort has been raped a long time ago, and they're just exposed to these things at all times. And so they end up having these really reactions that we call crazy because they're looking at raw source reality, but they're fighting with us because technically all the sane people in the room are tearing them apart energetically to accept their version of reality. This is why we put all the crazy people together. And this is why a schizophrenic or someone who's, it's not even really fair to say schizophrenic, someone who thinks that they are Jesus Christ may have a separated personality, or they may have just associated into a different identity. So it's not even fair to call that schizophrenic. But the point is that you can have two or three people that are claiming to be Jesus Christ in the same loony farm, because all of them don't mind that your reality is different than theirs. And you and I, our sanity culture, we live in a sanity culture that insists that we all have to agree to the same reality, which means that anyone who's not able to do that, we have to isolate and put in a separate place. So the shaman, the mystic, even the pagan, these are the ones that were utilizing their animism more, and they were able to use it to build their own reality. And quite frankly, it just scared everyone else around them. But ultimately, that's the medicine we need, which is why so many of these people are shaman, because it's not that we need to see what they see. It's that we need the practice of being around someone that's seeing a deeper form of reality than we are. Even if it means they're making up stories about the ink and the blue receipt, you're still looking at someone that has a thicker aperture. And the more that we can agree with them, the less crazy we will see them as, but also it will regulate us, and we will start to see more of the Bigfoots in the room, more of the energy in the room, because we're able to co-regulate and just have a better understanding. Ultimately, I think it's smell. Ultimately, that's what I think it is. And that once Jesus probably just saw smell, he saw the aura of someone. And by seeing the aura of someone, he's able to necromance. That's why that word is used so often to describe him, because he's playing with the demonic field of your aura, the smells around you. He's able to see through the deception and say, dude, you're not blind. You're literally hanging out next to the well saying, oh, if only I could find the well where hundreds of people are. This is how you beg. Okay. You're lying. And that's what he did. He healed the demonic smell of the deception that the man had around himself. And so this is the true work right now. It seems easy, but if you think about consciousness back then, this was a massive revolutionary step to be able to even understand that someone's even lying. There's not even a commandment about thou shalt not lie. There's a commandment that says you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It doesn't actually say you can't lie, because ultimately we have to lie. We have to lie to ourselves about what reality is until we can feel better. You see this with children, and children slowly grow up, but it doesn't mean they reach a state where now you have reality. They just reach a state where socially all of us have pretended to be, I'm an accountant, I'm a landscaper, I'm a bartender, right? And so that's really all we've done. We've just reached that kiddie pool threshold of pretending. And so now the system has cut us off. It said, you can't come to work anymore. You can't come sit in a cubicle where we have to give you free paper clips you're going to steal. We have to give you a bathroom. No one's going to clean it up. We have to clean up all your trash. We have to give you parking. No, you're older than that now. Go home. Figure out a way to survive. And this would be the corona. This would be the gauntlet of where we're going now. And so it's to me, it's good. To me, it shows that whoever is causing these things to happen wants us to become more self-sufficient. And it's hard for me to convince myself that it's a prison planet after watching this, if that makes sense.
Now, when it comes to our perception, I couldn't verify any of this information. I've heard it on various podcasts or researching different conspiracy theories in the past, but I've heard that the military at one point had developed some sort of night vision goggles that used some sort of technology that had allowed whoever was using them to perceive some of these things that we were just discussing, that schizophrenics normally see, maybe some of the intelligences out there, and they had to quickly discontinue the glasses because it was obviously showing people too much. And something also similar to the Dicinian dye goggles. Have you researched any of that?
Yeah, just personally, and guys, I don't know shit. I'm just a researcher. I seriously mean that. But I think that anything that's going to tell you that there's some kind of lens that's going to show you something, I think just doesn't understand how the eyes work. That I really think that so the reason why some people can see auras and some people can't is because I'm hallucinating your aura. If I was more deeply connected to you, I would understand your consciousness more. And if I saw that something was bothering you, I might paint that bother on your skin simply in my HUD, my heads up display, like a video game. I would paint that so I would remember that, oh, I think he's having some kidney trouble. So I'm going to bring out the yellow in his eyes more. I'm going to bring out the green hue over his shoulder because it shows that he doesn't have enough love for an injury he had on his back. I'm just making this stuff up, but it's like I think the more you understand people, you're going to use your holodeck, your eyes, to just render the colors that you need to keep the information that you perceive as important as being there in the room. So when it comes to weapons that would work, I think in realms we're talking about, I'm looking for some kind of smell-o-vision. I'm looking for a chemo signal detector, which would not be an optical thing. It would be a chemical sounding sort of a thing. And I believe that this kind of technology does exist. Check it out, not only in the ocean, but inside our body. Because it would seem to me that a shark has the ability to smell things from very far away, and that they're doing this through the electrical sensation of the chemo signals that are in the air. So, you would probably be looking at a device that is not a lens technology, but an electrical drum, that a parabola drum that you would point that is reading the finer electrical signals, that the static that's coming back in the air from something. And that if you had something like that, because you can aim a parabola, a sonar signal, you can aim through active and passive sonar. You can detect a certain place and analyze that place. And here's the thing: we do this too. When you look across the field and you see roses, you and I have been told that the reason why we see roses is because light bounces on there and it reflects red and it comes back to us. And I don't mind if you want to keep believing that, but I think this is pre-Aquarian. This is pre-science, really. Before we even understood that our colors are triangulated. Our cones are triangulating new colors that don't exist. They're hallucinating them, which means that it could be that you've been to that field before, or you smell the chemo signals that are coming from that field, and they give you a hallucination that tells you it looks like there's probably roses over there, and you fill in the colors, the rest, because it's part of your spectrum of what you think is happening. So the ultimate truth detector would not be vision, because keep in mind, your eyes are half a second behind. So even if you're using that, you are now a half a second behind a much more advanced technology, which is smell. So what is tapping into that smell? And it's going to be any kind of creature that has any kind of sonaric or electrical capabilities. Tetrachromatic color vision does exist in humans. We've only recently even been able to trace this, that there is a fourth receptor, and these opsins that are in your eyes that determine what we call red, green, blue, and yellow. The color blindness that we understand to be is really just simply the ability for someone's consciousness to accurately render the difference between the opsin flow of the wavelength of the chemo signal that comes into your eye. And this is what we call color. We just didn't know it at the time. And so it's just a drum in your eye that's receiving a signal, and the radius of that drum determines how the depth of what signal it reads. And that more women have these tetrachromatic cones in their eyes. They're able to see electricity. And this is not fantasy. Fish do this. Man does it too, but it's just more women do it. And I think they do it because socially women had to be more in tune with who was lying in the village. A man just needs to know, where buffalo,
Mm.
right? Woman needs to know which bitch lied to me tonight, And so they tend to see these things more because the chemo signal becomes so much more important. So I think the technology's there, but I don't think it would come through the optics. Huge long
No,
answer.
that's great.
Sorry.
Well, speaking of technology, for the last few minutes, you mentioned that we couldn't perceive that some of these people at the top might be in some sort of hidden airships in the sky,
Hmm.
and the technology could be beyond anything we've ever imagined. And that's really, for me, not difficult to consider because from all the brilliant researchers that I've had on and information that's come out, it's pretty easy to deduce that the technology available to us is maybe up to 100 or more years behind what these people have access to. What
Hmm.
is your understanding, based on everything that you've been researching, the level of possible technology that these people have?
So it seems to me that since Michelson Morley, we were able to place ourselves into a corner where we limited our technology by placing it into a realm of
Mm.
fantasy called special relativity. And we invented, I personally believe that, okay, so I don't reject that there's something called nuclear fusion and that there's something called fission. I believe in radioactive decay. I believe that all those things exist. Okay. I'm a zetetic. I will watch my science. But I also know that the idea of Iran being 6 months away from a nuclear bomb has been a threat that I've been listening to since I was in sixth
Mm-hmm.
grade, and that if we do not vote right now or we do not do this, and that one of the biggest motivations I've ever seen to what's holding the glue together of what government is the idea that there's a giant bomb and there's a red button and that there's a suitcase, and that if we vote for the wrong idiot, that button's going to get hit, and that would be the only story that it would take to keep us all together. And that in order for you to have that, you're going to need to invent a science that is going to have a threshold that stops people from going past a certain point and going, it must be true because the government said it. And that science is special relativity. So I don't think that we are 100 years behind. I think that we are facing the wrong direction. And that all the technology that we even think works is it's a misnomer because we're basing it off compression, explosion. Our jet fantasies are simply that. They're fireworks. Now, I don't think that this is because the evil people are fooling us, and if we could just undo the chains, we'd win. I personally think that we want this technology because we are afraid of our own power. And by being afraid of our own power, we're going to legitimize our slavery so much to where we may not want the collar to leave our neck. We may just turn it into silk instead and call it a tie, and that we may want to stay within a cubicle, which would be a little cell that would keep us safe, and we would be getting pellets and commas every month on a paycheck, and that this is a psychological reaction to being afraid of the world. So I don't see it being as there's an elite superpower that's hiding things from us. I think it's an elite superpower that's like, would you guys please get off your
Mm-hmm.
fucking ass and stand up like a man? That's just how I see it. And I think that this technology is part of that. And so the technology that we see right now is getting worse, not better, because they're trying to wean us off of it. And we are slowly being weaned off of that. And the first way we really are going to find that is we have to give up on the idea of there being a Masonic power saving Messiah that's going to give us a free energy device. I think this is step one to weaning ourselves off of that. And Musk really is that. He's giving us all of the fantasies that we need to believe, and that none of it has to be true. But this is not a different time. It looks like a different time. It looks like this is the revelation, and it is. But I want you to know that this happened with Kennedy. This happened with Sputnik. This happened with George Washington. This happens with the Civil War. We had a Northern Army 6 years that was going to invade the South 6 years before, we decided, oh my God, we're having a civil war. Who could have ever foreseen this happening? So it's this is not new things. What's different is we have the internet, but more importantly, what's different is our apertures are wider and we're able to see things. And this is going to look like a deep state. If you can't take the whole truth, you're going to call it a deep state. You're going to say the state is legit, but inside the state is a tumor and it's deep inside and it's one little portion. And if we go in and we find that deep state and we pull it out, then the rest of government's good. And this is what a battered wife says. Oh, he just had a rough day and he just hit me. This, this is just standard trauma, abuse, Stockholm syndrome stuff. And it's okay. This is how you get out of the cave. You say there's a deep state first. And then you want to cleanse the deep state. Then you start to notice, wait a minute, government itself, the whole thing is this way. And then at first you're disgusted and you think because of the world's broken. And that's where you're going to get lost. And most of us slip back into the cave because we think it's broken and we think that it has to be evil. But I'm telling you, it's not. If you understand that this is a hermetic ladder, this would be the necessary precautions that you would want to have on a kiddie pool to just stop really stupid, retarded people from drowning themselves. You would want this. You would. And you would want to set them up with a fake energy that's made out of toy guns and that free energy and everything else. And that would be the necessary way, and that you would wait for people to naturally climb themselves out. And this is why we have their system now. Even going into business for yourself is a hermetic spiritual journey, if you think about it. If you're able to find a way to support yourself, you've stepped into a beyonder role. You are becoming an elite. This is the original definition of Freemason. And I know most people in our field are like, Freemason, get him. We have to kill that Freemason. But the Freemason was the first guy that wasn't a serf. He wasn't a slave. He was the dude that went from village to village, and everyone's like, holy shit, you can build me a house out of stone? He's like, fuck yeah, I'll show you how. And they're like, oh my God, you're so powerful. And he was powerful. And why do we hate Freemasons? Because we're afraid of power. That's all. That's all. And so we're just watching our natural reaction to wanting more power, but being afraid of it. And more importantly, we want to be afraid of power, but we never have to want to admit it. So we want a slavery that lets us pretend as if we're enslaved. We want to pretend as if someone else is oppressing us. That really helps our fantasy because it allows us to stay on our knees more. So if there's a lifeguard that's saying you can't leave the kiddie pool, the kids that don't want to leave, they're going to insist it's because the lifeguard is insisting that they stay. And that's actually not what's happening at all. They're just kind of piggybacking off of that. I think that's really at the heart of what happens most of the time because people are just afraid. It's a scary place, They want the stories. They want the red and the green light in the harbor that says, look, don't go over here and go over here. And then, and they're doing the best they can.
Yes, man. Perfect note to end on. James, thank you so much. This was great. Definitely going to have you back on sooner than last time. So much more we can get to. Before you go, let the audience know where they can find your books and everything else you've got out there.
Yeah, please consider my book, Black Eye Club. It goes into so much more of this. It takes place in Africa. You can find it on Amazon, or you can look up my website, JTrue, or find me on YouTube, or just Google me. But it's Black Eye Club. It's audio, it's paperback, it's Kindle. All the versions are there. It's my 7th book. It's actually a prequel to another book I've already written called Quantum Rapture, which literally explains that the Old Testament has AI demons that were training early man to psychologically stop acting like animals, and that this would be part of this farming process of consciousness. So it's an interesting take on what's happening on a much broader scale. So and I'll just say thank you so much, Christopher, for having me on. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yes, it's been wonderful. Thank you, James. We'll do it again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.